Hello, everybody. I'm Robert Ginyard, and welcome to this episode of Profiles of Dreamers and Doers, a new podcast created to highlight those who dared to dream and committed to make their dreams come true. The guests on our program open up to share the ups, downs, and the in-between moments they encountered in pursuit of realizing their dreams. I'm sure you will find our guests to be aspirational, motivational, and inspirational. Today, I am joined by world-renowned artist Larry Poncho Brown. And without further ado, I'm not going to hold us up. I'm going to start the program and introduce to you one of Baltimore's crown jewels, Mr. Larry Poncho Brown. I'm going to go through, as Larry just mentioned a few moments ago, he says, he saw my cards and he says, uh-oh, Oprah questions, Oprah cards. No, it's just that there's some notes here, and I want to make sure I get this right because a lot of people, Poncho, really don't know the depth of your experiences and your work. I'll start off by saying that Larry and I, Poncho and I were both in the same 7th grade class. He sat next to me.
Copied off his paper.
Yeah. And while he may have copied off my paper, I couldn't copy off his art. So that's evident. So, you know, it's interesting that back when there's something special about somebody. And I knew that about Poncho back in the 7th grade. And maybe that was because of all the attention that the teacher gave him. And the heck with everybody else. But, you know, I've watched him grow over the years, and I'm proud to say he is a friend. But I want to give you a little bit of background on Poncho. He started his first business at the age of 17 and has been an artist ever since. His art has been published in Upscale Magazine, Ebony, Ebony Man, Essence, and Jet Magazine. His art is also featured in the UCLA Fowler Museum. His popular works have been prominently featured on several TV shows, including A Different World, In the House, The Wire, The Carmichael Show, Star, Greenleaf, and then the movies, Avalon, He Said, She Said, and Soul Food. So this brother's, he's got quite the repertoire. And then some of his corporate work, his corporate works are in Coppin State University, the Charles Wright Museum of African American History in Detroit, the District of Columbia Superior Court. Now, you got to be a bad brother when your work is in the court system. So we also have his work in the Children's Hospital of Richmond, Virginia, Howard University Hospital, and Yale New Haven Park Avenue Medical Center. So this guy has the chops. And so welcome him with me, everybody. Give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
As many of you may know, Dibby Dibby is all about following your dreams. And I got to give some of you a little bit of a history of how Dibby Dibby was created. It was a result of my prostate cancer journey. After going through cancer, I realized that if cancer didn't kill me, the death of my dreams would. And I think, quite frankly, a lot of us give up on our dreams, and it has a way of manifesting itself in certain areas of the body where there's some stress. And if there's a little inch, and I got my sister Ayana over here nodding her head because she deals with wellness. And I tell you, I've seen so many people that have deferred so many dreams, they begin to get sick. And that's why Langston Hughes' poem, A Dream Deferred, means so much to me, because at some point, that dream has to find some escape. So I was awakened in the middle of the night with a vision about Dibby Dibby, which is dream it, believe it, do it, be it. And it came to me because I made a promise to God after my cancer treatments. I said, I'm going to go after some dreams and do some things with my life. 2 years later, I didn't do a darn thing. I was laying in bed, and God basically told me, you didn't keep your word. You didn't keep your promise. And so from that point on, Dibby Dibby has been my mission, and I'm about helping people realize their dreams and to live longer. I will add a side note, Poncho, in that the way this event was even advertised is under health and wellness, because I'm a firm believer that your dreams are part of your mental health and physical health. So, so again, whoever was meant to be here, you are here. So thank you for coming out. So that's a little bit of the background on Dibby Dibby. But without further ado, I'd really like to start to get into talking with Poncho about his dream. When did it happen? And what did you do to get the ball moving forward with it?
Wow, that's a big question. I will lay the groundwork. I think that dreams are, your parents teach you how to dream or they don't. Your parents either set you up to shoot for dreams or they defer you from them. And I was blessed that neither one of my parents tried to defer me from mine. Now, I happen to be a second-generation artist. My father was an artist. And excuse me for the candy. I have a bit of a respiratory issue I'm trying to get past, so I may cough a little bit. But my father was a teenage parent. He had me when he was 17, and his aspiration was to be an artist. But as you can imagine, in the 60s and 70s, there were no outlets for African-American artists, especially in Baltimore City, to pursue any kind of dream towards art. And so he eventually just got frustrated, got out of art, and moved into printing. And I'll bridge that later on. But that piece alone is my setup, because here I was imitating this person who was frustrated already. And so a while before he passed, he was my biggest cheerleader. My father attempted to trick me away from it because of his frustration, and without explaining it to me. So you can imagine what that's like to see a parent that you're emulating and imitating, but they're trying to find all the ways they can find to discourage you from doing what you do. So that's my foundation into what I consider to be my dream, because I was simply imitating what my father did, and I happened to be good at it. Another thing, too, is that it took me a long time to realize that there's a DNA encoding in us on some of the things that we do. And so that's an important piece of it, too. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's my foundation. So by the time I got to high school, I went to my father's high school. My father ran track, I ran track. He wrestled, I wrestled. I never liked any of that stuff. You know, but I ended up being halfway decent at them. So it was enough for me to hide behind myself. But the one thing I always did was I knew I was going to do my art. I knew that from walking up, I knew I was going to do art. So that was already locked and ingrained. And thankfully, I had the kind of parents that didn't discourage it. Because a lot of us have parents that just, they had a teaching style. You know, I'm a baby boomer too. So you either did what they told you to do, or they lived vicariously through you. And very few parents really left enough latitude for you to find out who you were, because finding out who you were wasn't important back in the 70s and in the 60s. So
now, when you say finding out who you were, was it more or less you do what I tell you to do?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, with your dad, look at those eyes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, that's the way it was for most of us. It's not just me.
Yeah.
You know, our parents had a particular style. Our grandparents had a particular style, because they had a particular lifestyle that we were coming through in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s that were transferred to each one of us. So dreaming, we ain't had a luxury of dreaming. You know, we were busy dreaming of how to vote, dreaming of how to not be lynched. How can you talk about drawing?
Yeah, right.
Where does that fit?
You know, now what's interesting, when you talked about your dad, you mentioned that he was frustrated. Did you see and feel that as a child growing up? Did you see where your dad was a frustrated artist? You know, how did you pick up on that?
Well, I saw it. I didn't know what it was. You know, I didn't know what it was really till after I got grown. You know, but I saw him, because he was self-taught, I saw him reach a point in his painting where he just got totally frustrated and didn't finish it, or his mood when he was painting, and I never really understood it, because my father wasn't the most verbal person in the world. So I had to kind of look, assess, and then keep going. But that never stopped me from doing what I was doing over here.
Yeah.
You know, but as I started to try to really bridge the divide in my dream, that's when I began to really understand some of the frustration that he was going through.
Now, years later, and we'll touch on a couple of other things, but years later, how did your dad react to you being an artist and a successful one at that?
I think that played out the way it was supposed to play out. I mean, I think that what happened was I was very determined to do that, regardless of whatever anybody thought. Okay. So eventually, he began to see the success I was having doing what I was doing, and he didn't know how to help by that point. But then you have certain circumstances that happened. I had a major fire at my studio in '95.
But no, don't get to that,
well,
Mr.
I mean,
Poncho.
but that's a landmark, because that's when my father really said, "Hey, from now on, I got your back on all issues."
And the reason why I was asking you to hold off on that is that, you know, all of us, whether it's art, business, you name it, we're all put through tests at some point in our lives. And as the good book and Bible talks about it, you go through these fiery trials. You literally went through a fiery trial in, what was it, 1995?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. And how did you pick up and do it all over again?
Because I had to. You know, it's one of those things. If you don't die, you still got to start from another point.
Yeah.
Most of us just don't perish from something heavy happening.
Yeah.
We just find the resolve, and the resolve is already in us. We had ancestors that jumped off of ships so they wouldn't die. That's in us too. So as far as I was concerned, all I needed to do is just give myself enough mental time to heal.
Yeah.
Luckily, I had already started to see that my support system out there was, I mean, I can't tell you the amount of outreach that happened from collectors, friends, family, and otherwise in the artist community when I went through that situation, because it was a worst case scenario. You're talking about $1.5 million loss overnight. You're talking about the worst insurance ever. You're talking about everything at a point where I was just beginning to see the fruits of all the labor that I had put in to the business up to that point. And so if you can imagine, you're hitting your dream, things are lining up, the money's starting to come, X, Y, Z, and then this thing happens. It completely alters your view of a lot of different things. But the dream part of it was still there.
Okay. Now, and that was at the height of black art, African-American art. The other thing I wanted to share is that this gentleman's art was over in approximately 3,000 galleries across the country, and his artwork was on the walls of about 500,000 homes in America. How do you, with that kind of success, and around that time, I mean, it took a lot of fortitude to bounce back from that. You mentioned your friends who all came and rallied and supporters, but tell me about.
I don't look at it as fortitude, though. You know, we all have some resolve. You know, we're very diligent people. We have a lot of perseverance in us. You know, so my test that was just mine, but we all have different things that we face. Black people are some of the toughest people on the planet.
Amen.
And that I know. We find a way when there is no way. And so, again, for me, that's not to say I didn't have a mental break. You know, I went into depression. I was diagnosed as being clinically depressed during that period of time. I'm talking about Zoloft, the whole nine. I went through a severe ordeal trying to get back to some sense of normalcy. I think what happened to me was that I just had this realization that as long as I was trying to recoup what I had before, I would continue to stay frustrated. So at some point, I had to reach a point where I realized I had to turn the page completely. And there's a way to turn the page completely without starting over again, you know. And so from that point, I just turned the page. I allowed myself to open up to receive help, because that was something I think I've struggled with even today. All my friends will tell you that. But that's the main piece.
So why do you struggle receiving help?
Because I'm black.
Yeah.
You know, all of us realistically have a problem accepting help. I mean, I don't care who you are, how resilient you are. there's a point where that independence drive in you wants to handle it. And despite all the people that love you and all the supports that you may have or not have, it takes a stronger voice to say, I need help than it does to struggle through. And I really think that perseverance at some point can be severely overrated because we struggle unnecessarily.
Yeah.
When all you got to do is go, hey, yo, you know what? I do need help. And if they say no to you, that's one thing. But most of us deny people even saying no.
Wow.
You know.
Wow. Now, you mentioned about the depression and just wanted to find out how long did you go through that period?
Didn't go long.
Okay.
I'll tell you a funny story. It's not funny. It depends on where your perspective is. Okay, so they told me I had depression. They gave me, my doctor gave me a prescription for it. And he says, take it for about 2 months and give it time to get in your system. And you'll begin to feel a difference. So here we go. I try to cooperate. I'm on the last pill of this first prescription. And for some reason, I happen to be in the bathroom mirror taking the last pill. And I'm just going around, put the last pill on my tongue, and happened to look inside the mirror when I was taking the last pill.
Wow.
And I can't tell you the energy I felt. I was frustrated with myself. I was disappointed in myself. And I said, this is the last pill I'm taking.
Wow.
I need to redirect this. I'm not going to let somebody tell me how I feel and then give me a prescription. Now, I'm not demonizing medicine because some people actually need it. But I think you can be put in a real low place where you get those signals mixed up. And that was the last time I took it. Now, my doctor had a fit, and my psychologist had a fit. But here I am today, and I'm not on any of that stuff. So.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Touching on that, why do you think, my hat goes off in terms of revealing that, but why do you think so many people are so, particularly in the African-American community, so hesitant to say, hey, look, there's some things I need to deal with mentally, and I don't want to share it with anyone?
Because they don't know who they are. You know, how are you going to ask for help if you don't even know who you are? You know, I mean, if you have an idea, and to get back to this whole dream thing, first of all, I believe that those ideas are not yours. They didn't. You're not that bright. It didn't come into your head. I think that the Creator plants even your ideas in your head. And what you do with them is completely up to you. You know? So I just think that at some point you just have to kind of, how do you train yourself to listen? You know, nobody wants to put in sweat equity. You know, I'll tell you something that somebody told me when I was about maybe 12, and I didn't get it then, but I understand it now. And they said the dreams are experienced by one person. One person, that's you. Mm-hmm. And I don't care how close anybody else is to you, they will not be able to interpret that dream. And they went one step further and said even twins, even though they can finish each other's sentences and feel each other, even twins cannot interpret the other twins' dreams. Wow. So with that being said, I think that we're never really taught the power and the importance of a dream and what it means. It's not just a couple things that went through your mind pattern at that particular time. But if you get it and you get sparked by it, then what are you going to do about it? I mean, do you just sit on it like most people do? Or do you act on it? And I think that I'm just one of the people that have acted on it regardless of the circumstances.
So you follow through with it. Now tell us about some of the people who said no to you, that this dream that you had wasn't going to work.
We don't have enough,
did you?
We don't have enough time for it. Because I'm in Baltimore. Well, I had a lot of people in Baltimore tell me no.
All right.
I had my own art teacher tell me white people will never let you do the kind of art you want to do. And now, by the time he passed, he actually reversed that statement.
Yeah.
But he reversed that statement because I proved him wrong. Mm-hmm. You know? I heard a lot of no's. I had a lot of naysayers. That's what happens. I mean, come on. Black boy in Baltimore drawing pictures for a living. I mean, how many of y'all would have really believed that? You know? What do you believe if you see your child doing it? and he's out of trouble, but he's in the house all the time drawing. Now, you're either going to say, hey, look, I'm going to give him what he needs, or you're going to be concerned that he's too isolated with the drawing. Or you're going to say, hey, you're not going to ever make a living from that, so we need to get you a job. There's so many things that happen on a normal level with us that it really makes you want to evaluate, well, how were you brought up? Mm-hmm. Were you brought up in an environment to believe in these things? You know? And how do you share that with other people? See, I love being with other creative people. So while most people have 5 friends that don't get them, and they have to spend all this time trying to explain who they are to these friends before they can even have a conversation. Well, I realized early that all my friends are artists, because none of us are crazy if we're all together. I don't have to justify who I am to them first. They get every aspect of why I think the way I think. So I think your support system has to be kind of a reflection of you, but you also got to have somebody in your circle that's going to encourage you to want to do something. I mean, if you got 3 friends that complain about their job, you're already dead. Because that does rub off on you after a while. Yeah. It rubs off on you after a while.
Well, you know, you mentioned boy coming out of Baltimore, young black boy coming out of Baltimore. There's a saying in the Bible that a prophet is not honored in his own hometown. What kept you here in Baltimore? Because, quite frankly, somebody could see you on the street, Poncho, and that's Poncho. Somebody in New York could see you and like, that's Poncho. Can I get your autograph?
But Baltimore is my hometown. You know, most of the people in the art industry think I'm from someplace else anyway. Probably Mars, I don't know. But so Baltimore has always been a fit for me because, number one, you can find space here relatively inexpensively. It's centrally located. I can get to the airport in 15 minutes. I can get to New York in 3 hours. I can get to Philly in 2 hours. It was just a good fit for me. Couple that with my entire family is from Baltimore.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I think I do that most people from Baltimore don't do is that I filled up 4 passports. I've traveled the world.
And why is that important?
Because you'll go crazy living in Baltimore. You know, you got to extend your stimuli. If your stimuli is just in a place like Baltimore and that's your only point of reference, you're behind. That's why it helps to travel not just in Baltimore, but to go to D.C., see what's happening in D.C., go to Philly, see what's happening in Philly, go to Florida, go wherever you are allowed to go to get another perspective. And I think one of the characteristics of most Baltimoreans is that most of them don't own a passport and most of them don't leave the state line.
Wow. Now, in terms of traveling, was that something that was instilled in you by your parents when you were younger to travel or
that
see
was
the world?
instilled in me by my mother. My mother had a menial job working at a hospital. She didn't make a lot of money, but she knew how to rub 2 nickels together and make whatever happen, magic. And she traveled once a year or twice a year based on the money that she would save.
You know, and I'd like to add
I got that from my mother.
To add into that as well, in that my mother worked at a hospital, psychiatric nurse, but that was one of the things that I can recall that she instilled in us to travel. And that was at a very young age, but it's like once you travel and see other places, you are no longer limited by one geographic location. And so that's why I think it's important to travel. And I'm glad that you had the opportunity to do that as a kid. But what do you tell some of these kids today in some of these schools that are, you know, high schools, college for that matter? What do you tell them about traveling?
I got to be honest with you. I'm totally frustrated with schools. I've spent, this year is my 40th year as a professional artist. And of that 40 years has been mentoring artists and going to schools and speaking to middle schools, high schools, colleges all over the country. I guess when my son turned 18, something happened to me. Because now it's like I don't have the patience, the infrastructure for them to learn is really not there anymore. I've watched them completely destroy all the art programs, so kids they don't even have that sensibility anymore. They have no patience. We're in this social environment now where all of them have a phone and staring into it. So I don't feel the same encouragement to go to schools like I used to speak because of it. I found other ways to lend my support to that other than standing in front of a couple of kids that are not looking me eye to eye. Mm-hmm. I just can't do that at this point in my career anymore.
What do you think we need to do to, I guess, prime the pump, if you will, that they're receptive to art?
You know how sometimes you just, I hate to sound dismal, the priming the pump moment is over? Mm-hmm. I really believe it. Coupled with technology, and coupled with the fact that no art classes are in schools anymore, very little, we're now experiencing the byproduct of a non-sophisticated, non-cultural group of kids. And that's not going to change anytime soon.
Now, from an art standpoint, you mentioned technology. Mm-hmm. Do you think the increase in technology has taken away from the true artistic skills of folks to be able to express themselves without the use of technology?
That's a mixed question. I think that social networking has its positives and its negatives. But the one thing it does do is it gives everybody a platform. So, in other words, when I came through, artists didn't have any kind of outlets. There was no internet. There was no. You barely had a cell phone, probably as big as this mic. Right. But now kids can post whatever they drew, good or bad, on Facebook and have an environment, and that's so powerful. I don't think we really even. It's so easy for us to do that we don't realize that where one place fails, where we're doing what's happening in school and in school programs, they still get a visibility of people all over the world doing their art. So that's a positive. Now, but if you want to see the very best of art, look at Facebook. You want to see the very worst in art, look at Facebook. It's just everything is everywhere, and trying to decipher what's what becomes the issue after that.
Yeah. One of the things that you and I have talked offline on many occasions about art, particularly in the African-American community, in terms of us valuing artists, and wanted to get your take on where are these artists now in terms of, and what can we do to help support that art?
Wow. The art side of me is saying, hey, make sure you have something on your wall that's a reflection of you. I can say something sick like that, but we don't really understand how important art is. Not us, because this group is probably the last group that really understands it. When I started in the 80s, there was a sensitized group of African-American people looking for their culture and could not find it. So when the art market blew up back then, Ernie Barnes and all the stuff that was on Good Times, all the stuff that was on a Cosby Show, we were stimulated by that stuff. And then because of the technology moves that were happening, it was accessible. That was the beginning of the revolution that I partake in. But now it's been 25 to 30 years since that explosion. So you got the new generation of people coming behind that who don't have that same hunger, don't have that same interest, but may have the same money. And so that whole cultural breakdown thing becomes an issue that's going to get worse. And then every now and then something will happen that'll stimulate it again, like Black Panther did last year. Everybody felt it. And whatever your opinion is, because we are the Black folks, we got so many opinions that we actually drive ourselves crazy. Yeah. And so you got a camp of folks who are very excited. You got another camp of folks that had their hands on their hips. Why y'all look so excited? But that's the kind of stuff that happens that can catalyze and re-stimulate stuff. I am able to survive as an artist now, and I've had my trials and tribulations, trust me, by the people who mention my name from that period to now. Because once I'm off of their tongue, you're pretty much done. Right now, this is a time of trying to stay relevant with whatever you decide to do.
What's relevant in terms of what you see? What's on the landscape in terms of staying relevant?
Again, we see a lot of people now, especially talking about wellness, where we're talking about folks finding out who they really are, what really moves them, how are they wired. And I think that's so important. And it's such a big statement now that nobody's really breaking down how you do that. Mm-hmm. You know, you got trial and error, of course, and you got that thing that just says, I can't take it anymore. I'm just going to be this. Right. But it's never a healthy process of finding out who you are and what moves you. I think that's indicated by the things you do outside of work, the things that you're passionate about, because that's another thing that, as a baby boomer, that wasn't something that was very important to most people. You know, what are you passionate about? You know, do what you're passionate. That wasn't part of the equation. You hear people talking that now, but you can say that to somebody and they not really understand what that means. You know, the kids today know more about who they were in some cases than we do today, because we were told how to be. And then you wake up at some point and now okay, maybe this is me. You know, my friends have been making me feel crazy all this time. Maybe they're the ones crazy.
Right.
You know? Mm-hmm. But ideas are so crucial, man. I mean, especially in this time. I mean, everybody's looking for, you ever just wake up and you feel like, man, something's about to happen for me. Something big I feel something. I just can't put my finger on it, but something's already happened. And then you start looking at the things you're good at, and you start wanting to do something with it. And then you start trying to fool with it a little bit. And then you say it to a couple of your friends, and 3 of them laugh. So you go back into yourself again, but you keep on trying anyway. And then you say, this time I ain't going to tell them. But you're still kind of doing it. And so it's like you living in the closet, really, on your own ideas. So my thing is that, number one, those ideas are not just yours. Mm-hmm. And number 2, you're governed by what you do with them. You know, you say thank you to God by just doing them. Yeah. You know, I think that I see too many people. You know who I really hate? I know hate is a strong word. I hate idea people. Because idea people just want to impress you with the fact that they got an idea. They probably have never got any of them implemented. But they'll be all in your face to impress you that they have ideas. Everybody's got ideas. But I just want you to start cherishing your ideas and cherishing your vision, because everybody in this room has a specific vision. And I think you have to be willing to put whatever time is necessary into that vision to help you find another piece of who you really are.
Well, you know, and you bring up an important point, because that's really the importance of Dibby. Dream it, believe it, do it. That's where a lot of people fall short.
The do it part should be first. It just doesn't rhyme as good.
Right. Right.
Because the most powerful statement, the most powerful slogan ever created was just do it.
Yeah.
It's the most powerful statement ever.
So what keeps people from doing it, Poncho?
You know, it's fear. And then right behind fear, right close to it, is ignorance. You know, it's like you don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. And then you got this thing in your hand that can Google anything on the planet, but you don't use it. You haven't used a library card in about 15, 20 years. Wow. You might not have read a book of your interest in 10 years. Now, I can go down a list of the things that we do to ourselves to desensitize ourselves. Because once you read up on something you're interested in, it just reinforces what he already put in your head. Mm-hmm. And it's about, you know, we already know what positive reinforcement is. Well, why can't we do that for ourselves? You know, for me, see, my job is so obvious as a talent that all I got to do is continue to work in the realm and in the medium that I'm comfortable. But there's so many other interests that are not as obvious as that require the same tenacity. Because the one thing I do every day is I paint or I draw. I'm in my studio every day. My friends will tell you sometimes 7 days a week, and it's never shorter than a 12-hour day. And it's not like it's work, because it's what I do. I live an extremist lifestyle, though, so I know I'm crazy. Because that's not what most normal people do. You know, so there's a cost. I have to make sure that I don't get so inundated with this thing or enamored with this thing that it begins to control my life.
Well, Poncho, now you talked about the cost, and we had talked about this at one of our meetings some months ago. The cost. What has success cost you?
Probably a decent relationship.
And why so?
Because my work is another woman.
You once mentioned to me that people fall in love with Poncho the artist, but they have a problem being in love with Larry Poncho Brown.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I mean, come on, you meet me, you know, I still got my front teeth. Not bad on the eyes. I have a sense of humor. But the moment you realize this man really is in the studio 24 hours a day, it shifts. So the things that people like about me or might even be encouraged about me becomes a problem right away. Because the discipline that I have is not something that I could sit here, we're talking about dreams, but the discipline conversation probably would have most of you guys going to your car because you're like, nah, I ain't that deep into it. You know, what is the line? How do you find a delicate balance to still do the dream without and live your life too? Yeah. You know, so that's been the biggest challenge for me is, you know, finding someone that really understands all that's required of me to be balanced. And I think that's an important thing for each of you, whatever your thing is. You want somebody to be totally receptive to what that thing is, not try to rule it, not try to mandate it, not try to manipulate it, but to balance out whatever that thing is. Because without that, it's kind of it's a solo journey, more or less.
Kind of along that line, again, you've been in the presence of, I mean, people all over the world, and you know, your artwork speaks for itself. But what is the downtime like? I mean, how do you go from, you know, seeing the highs and lows? What kind of keeps you at a happy median that you don't get too full of yourself?
That's a real good question because I think when you find your passion and you get out the way, there's a humbleness that comes with it too. And so when I'm not doing art, you don't see me walk around looking like an artist in Baltimore. I don't talk about art unless I'm in that kind of environment. I tell people now that I'm a little older that I'm not governed by just art. I have other parts of me. So I think ego is part of the biggest person you're going to wrestle with your dreams and your ideas. Because there's so many things you're going to want to do because you want to do it, but then in order to make any dream or idea have a momentum, you still have to kind of be receptive to others and how it's going to aid other people. I tell people quick that art was never intended for just the artists who draw for themselves. It's not intended for me to do what I do for me. I have to be willing to, number one, get my therapy. And I'm going to tell you what art is. I saw art is. God wanted me to have another place to go, to communicate, to think. And each painting I do represents two people I probably would have killed on the street of Baltimore. So it's a form of therapy. I get that. I make sure I get my therapy first. And it just so happens that I like the prospect of business. So being able to figure a way to make my work into a business was just kind of another talent set that I had. You know, so I'm not just a right-brained artist creating pretty pictures for the world to see. I found a way to use my craft to not just initiate my own momentum, but to help other people initiate theirs. And so finding that balance is the challenge. But before you can find a balance, you got to be off your behind. You got to be able to have enough things working to see even what the latitude or the longitude is on whatever this idea you have is. You know, because you're going to have times when you're in season and not, in flavor and not. And your dream is your dream regardless. You know, what do you do when people are not being receptive to the dream? I've had plenty of periods in my progression where things just shift for whatever reason, you know, but it's not stopped me from finding other ways to implement my dreams. For instance, from 1985 to 2005, there was a huge movement in African American art. There was a network set up already. All I needed to do was to come in. I came in at just the right time, and I flourished in that opportunity. And then 9/11 hit, and the whole infrastructure of everything fell. The economy fell. The real estate market fell. The car industry fell. The housing market fell. And when the housing market falls, what happens to artists? Well, we're the first ones to know it because it's a disposable income kind of a business. So, yeah, that's a redirect. And the internet coming in was another redirect because everything that happened through that movement was short of technology. That was a verbal network that was set up, okay? And then we're moving now to a world where everything is internet. So all those 3,000 galleries that I used to service are now, I would say 90% of them are gone. And the other percentage of it, my business used to be 80% wholesale and 20% retail. Well, now it's like 95% retail and 5% wholesale. So you have to adjust to whatever's happening in your particular business. And see, the one thing I did learn while we're talking about the dream is that I took the time to learn the art business. So whatever it is the thing you're vibing on, make sure you learn what the boundaries are. What can you do? What can't you do? What hasn't been done before? You know, I think that's how you get leverage on trying to put some longevity, because a dream and longevity are two different things.
Well, you know, and you're talking about the way that market shift. Most people, when they think of artists, they think of someone who's so into their art that they can't relate to real life and everyday things. All right?
Sound like you described me, man.
No, far from you, because actually, one of the things that I admire about Poncho is that he can go politics, art, world issues, religion. I mean, and the business piece as well. This guy does an awesome job in terms of marketing his business. I see what you do through social media. So you're always marketing and promoting. And so I guess that gets back to learning the business and knowing exactly how to promote yourself.
What he just said sounds good. I mean, I want to meet me, okay? But it's not that complicated for me. For me, it's like I don't like politics particularly. I don't like, I'm not the most social person in the world particularly. But I am comfortable in my skin. So I can go anywhere because I'm comfortable in my skin. And I think that that's important for all of us because you never know who you're going to meet that's going to help elevate what you're trying to do. But you still have to be present. And I have to fight myself on the social side of me because I'm not the most social person in the world. Now, I love to hang with my friends. That's cool. But when it comes to trying to forward my business, that's probably the one thing I have to work on regularly is make sure I get involved socially, at least be in tune with what's happening with politically. Because in that scheme, a lot of answers reveal themselves. For instance, like right now in the last 4 years, we've been so distracted with the orange-faced man that you end up talking about the orange-faced man whether you want to talk about him or not. Or people pull you into a conversation with the orange-faced man. And while everybody's having these dialogues, there's an anxiety that's happening with it. And there's a rudeness that's happening in the country. There's a nastiness that's going on that we haven't really seen before. But while everybody's getting caught up in that vibe, do you realize how many opportunities are available for each and every one of us if you're not amongst the distracted? So I I don't talk about the orange-faced man as much as I can because I realize he has no impact on what I'm getting ready to do. As a matter of fact, this time is available to all of us, not just Poncho, you know. So politically, I have to kind of know what's happening to kind of know what I can do. But right now, the playing field is just so vast. And guess what? You don't need a lot of money to do it. You know, it's about partnering with people. It's about finding one person that has a set of resources that you don't have. It's about trusting them. It's about coming up with some common ideas and just trying to move them forward. And then duplicating that, not just that one situation. Do it with 5 other people. And so that's kind of what I'm always doing. I'm always partnering with people with artistic stuff. And so it's fun, you know, to come up with these ideas of other ways to do art. I mean, come on. I was told I got to sit down, I got to fill out a 5-page application for a grant that 2,000 other artists are going to be shooting for. And I don't do that. I was told I have to go and compete for every show that I want to enter, and I have to go and be juried and selected, and I don't always do that.
Why don't you?
Because life is bigger than that.
Okay. Okay.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one perspective, but see, I was a sign painter. I started off at Carver's Vocational Technical High School, and I painted signs. Now, signs, you might go, oh, what is that? That's kind of boring. But y'all got to read those signs. Somebody has to paint those signs. So my teacher told me, as long as you can do a sign, you'll never starve. He was right. But what I learned from that environment is that we used to go door to door, knocking on somebody's door. Hey, man, do you need a sign? Hey, do you need this? Do you need that? We were taught to get out in front of people and prove how they needed what we were doing. So by the time I shifted into doing art, that mentality was already part of mine. So where most artists are sitting around going, oh, I'll just fill out this grant for the baker and pray that I get in. I'm like, well, why don't I I'm going to go to every nonprofit I know because they got to raise what? Money. Mm-hmm. I'm going to show them how to do a fundraising piece that I create. I'm going to make them pay for it. They're going to make money from the prints that they sell. I'm going to keep my original. Mm-hmm. That nobody would have thought about doing that. And I've done 70 of them all over the country. I walk in, I present the idea. They look at each other and go, wow, this just looks too easy to say no. And I get it. So there's the traditional realm of me going to get a commission, I create my own commissions, and nobody even knows it. Mm-hmm. And I get upscale work, mm-hmm. Non-competitive upscale work. Artists wonder, how do you do that? How'd you get that? I just wrote a proposal, and I shared my idea. Nobody wants to write anything anymore. It's a simple 3-paragraph proposal. And so that's, to me, the other side of this idea thing.
So would this be more thinking out the box that so many people now are just...
No, it's not thinking. This is not thinking outside the box. This is completely removing the box. Mm-hmm. Because most of the time there isn't one.
Yeah.
They can say no, right?
Yeah.
But if you already are answering the right questions and you're relevant, you already know what would make them say no. And now I've gotten to the point, even with doing those commissions, that I know what will make them say, we can't do this. And I know how to remove that from the equation. And then you take that and you multiply it and you duplicate it. And then later on, it's going to come to you again with the next proposal that you do. So, I mean, you got to trust your ideas and you got to give them time to manifest. But if you're not planting those seeds, how are you going to get any harvest?
Yeah.
You got to plant seeds somewhere. See, everybody wants it to happen today. You know, I was just talking to my friend Jennifer. She's been waiting for an organization for about a year to come on board with an idea that she has. And it just came together a year later. But what would have happened if she'd not sent that proposal?
Yeah.
And it was running in the background. What happens if you don't have a folder behind that? You know, so I'm the kind of person that I feel like no matter what pace I move, no matter what momentum I move, I have to have a proposal in somebody's hand on somebody's desk. And if I'm fortunate to keep 10 of them rotating at one time, I'm probably not going to have to worry about work. Might not happen when I want it to happen. And it might. You know, but you got to lessen the... You just got to open the opportunities up and lessen the chance of you not being successful. Successful for me is just you being able to manifest the ideas that you have. That's all it means. We're not talking about money in the bank. We're talking about being fulfilled in what we do. And I think a lot of us are twisted when we talk about what even success is.
Well, you know, and I noticed as we talk, you know, Poncho has a way of peppering a little faith seeds in his conversation. Tell us a little bit about what drives you. What's the faith? Does that motivate you? Does it keep you grounded? What is that faith part, that belief part of Poncho?
I was raised in a Baptist family, and I went to church every Sunday with my family. And then I met a guy named Chanel Alford who told me that Jesus wasn't white. And from that day forward, my brain was lost because I began to research as much as I could about who we are, where we came from. It just created a calm in me that I didn't have before. Mm-hmm. And I think that faith for me is still very, very high despite whatever other things I have issues with modern religion. I do believe that everything that happens, that blessings are flowing all the time. You just have to be receptive enough to hear it. I don't believe that I have to pray for everything to come my way as a result of my art because I feel like he already blessed me once. He's waiting for me to show him by saying thank you with the projects that I do. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a peppering. It's actually a part of my personality that not a lot of people know even exists. Mm-hmm. But I'm very faith-minded. It saved me so many times. It keeps me from going off the edge. I think it keeps most of us from going off the edge. But I get out of the way, too. You ever you are the problem. Where you just get in the way of all the things you say you want. You say you want peace, but then you're arguing. You say you want this to happen, but then you don't do the work. You say you want this kind of person to come and you're not ready for them. I mean, so my thing is that I'm as I get older, I'm beginning to now know when that moment is presenting itself and to kind of submit in my own way and get the hell out the way and just do the work. And it's helped me stay calm. It's helped me see some possibilities that a lot of people may not see. But we can't continue to be our own worst enemy because we pay for it in our mental health. Because y'all crazy. We all are. I don't say it to insult anybody, but we all are. And we have to learn how to calm each other's crazy. You know, and if you're not inspiring somebody, then what's up? You know, if you're not in an environment where you're being stimulated and inspired. You know, I put a quote on my page last week that if you I'm probably going to paraphrase it. If you don't have a person that's stimulating you in your circle, then it's probably not a circle, it's a cage.
Wow. Wow.
No, because you have to be in an environment of people that are not just blowing air up your behind to make you feel good, but that are inspiring you. See, I have friends that when I'm with them, they make me want to work. Now, how many of y'all can say you got a person in your circle that makes you want to work? Most of us, that's the last thing we're trying to do, right? But there's all kinds of work, you know? And you're presented with all kinds of people for that reason. And the ones you levitate to, I think they're a testimony to who you are. You know, so we have to continue striving to find like minds. We have to continue dreaming and dreaming big. But most of all, man, the gluteus maximus is one of the biggest muscle groups on the body. It's being overused. It's being overused. Nobody's using it. Everybody's just waiting. Waiting for what? Armageddon? By then it's going to be too late.
On another note, someone just mentioned when I was coming in about when I told them that you were going to be here. They mentioned, I said, yeah, Poncho Brown. He's like, wait a minute, isn't that the brother that does the artwork for the jazz cruise? Tell us about that. How did you get involved in that? Anybody ever been on the jazz cruises, jazz festivals? This brother's work, he typically does the promotional pieces for them, correct?
Well, no, I mean, there is a phenomenon in the art realm as a featured artist. And I've been fortunate enough to have been a featured artist maybe 25, 30 times in my career, which means they hire you to do all of the promotional stuff. Your work is on the posters, on the marketing materials, and XYZ. Normally, they sponsor your space, they sponsor your housing, they sponsor whatever is necessary for you to be at that particular situation. I've done the Capital Jazz poster in, I think, 2014. I also did the Capital Jazz Cruise, but I've also done the Tom Joyner Cruise. So there are these genres of people that are really using and connecting with a lot of the top artists of today. And I consider myself to be one of the ones that's been fortunate enough to participate in that kind of thing. So, but art is more than what we see, and the opportunity is vast. And I think that we need to understand how vast opportunities are in each one of the realms of whatever your interests are.
Thank you. Well, we're going to take a few questions before we close out, but does anybody have any questions you'd like to ask Poncho? Don't get in the car and say, I should have asked the question. Here you go.
How you doing?
First of all, you're very impressive.
Thank you.
One.
Thank you.
It's a twofold question. One, have you familiar with a Baltimore artist by the name of Bebe Matthews?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I know Bebe. Bebe is one of the masters here in Baltimore. I spent a lot of time trying to protect the masters here in Baltimore. Okay. The Robert Torrances and the Thomas Stockett's, and I know all those cats. Those cats grew up with my dad.
What was your impression of Raymond Burton?
Man, my impression of most artists is amazement. Yeah. I can look at just about any kind of art and get motivated from it. Before I used to have an idea of what I liked and what I didn't like. I'm moving further and further away from liking and don't like anymore.
He was an early pioneer, though.
Mm-hmm.
Last question. I had the pleasure of meeting about a guy by the name of A.G. Gaston.
Mm-hmm.
You familiar with him?
Not familiar with him.
Okay, A.G. Gaston was considered to be the richest black man in America at the time. He owned banks, insurance companies, on the civil rights movement. And the top award that Black Enterprise can give you is A.G. Gaston Award. And when I met him, he was 97 years old. He said, young man, I will make 100. Y'all can put him up on your phone. Arthur George Gaston out of Birmingham, Alabama. And he told me, he said, one of the keys to longevity and good life is to be around young folks, but don't try to keep up with them.
It's the truth.
That makes sense?
Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. So,
perfect sense.
Thank you, sir, for being here.
And thank you.
You mentioned that art is a disposable income type of industry. How do we make it essential?
I don't think you can make it essential except for historically. How many of you have been to a museum in the last 5 years? That's good, because a lot of our folks' hands wouldn't be in the air. I think it's just kind of re-entering it as a priority in our development. And I see a lot of people failing with that. A lot of people are getting totally mixed up in the business of art rather than art itself. A lot of artists are confused now about how to sell their work rather than how to just create their work. I don't think that mainstay is going to change and that priority is going to change anytime soon. I think that we all could do a little more with supporting artists. That's the starting point. Or you can just make sure you support that kid, that nephew, that cousin that's drawing on the floor, you can do something at that point too. So I think until we do it from that level, it's going to be hard to change in other places.
I didn't have a question, but I had a couple of comments. And when you were sharing about how your father was frustrated and then you became a very successful artist, and that really blessed me because if God has a gift in a family, if it's not fulfilled in one generation, if the next generation, if they're listening, it will be fulfilled in that person. So I really enjoyed you saying that, and when you were saying, too, that these ideas don't come from us. And I have a poem called The Dreamer, and the last part of it says, where do you think dreams come from? Exactly. Then tell them I placed them there. So I thought that was really beautiful. And Paul is my witness that I gave the scripture this morning. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. But
That's
when
right.
the desire cometh, it is a tree of life. So you just confirmed everything that was said this morning. So
thank you.
I really enjoyed everything that you said. And I hope that people continue to just be blessed and encouraged by what you shared today.
Thank you.
I enjoyed
Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that I have a son that's an artist, too. It's a third generation now. My son is into music. He's into comedy. Lord knows he's into comedy. He does acting, and art is his fourth tier. And now that he's 29, he's just beginning to re-engage that part of him. So it's fulfilling. I just think at some point we just got to keep on sharing with each other, you know. Yes, sir.
You talked about the cost of being an artist and how it may have kept you from some of the relationships you described, art as another woman. Mm-hmm. From your travels, from some of the other artists, specifically artists that you know, and also here, because you've been doing this for such a long time, this is part, I guess, your norm. But have you found others where there is a balance between the work that they do, the art that they are really committed to, but also have made time for relationships?
I think that I've been around long enough now that I've seen just about every equation you could possibly see with creative people with regard to relationship. And so, yes, some of them do it well, some of them don't. Some of the issues that I may mention of earlier are still present. You know, they're just so struggling through it the best way that they can. There is a biological difference. There's a reason why there are more men artists that are successful than women artists, and I'm not saying that as a baseline, but guys are very one-dimensional. We know what we can do and what we can't do, and women are more apt to take care of their children, their families, their men, and put themselves last. And so that's why you see less women represented in the art business than you do see of males. And it's funny, I did a radio show for about 2 years where I talked to nothing but artists, and then they gave their brief bio, how they were raised. And women, 9 times out of 10, most of them didn't even call themselves artists.
Okay. And last question.
Yes, sir.
How'd you get the nickname Poncho?
I knew that was coming. I can't go through one interview session without that question. All right, so it's real simple. The Cisco Kid had a drunk sidekick named Poncho. My dad loved the Cisco Kid show. That puts you in a time frame of how old I am. So I am also a junior. Try signing Larry O'Neill Brown Jr. on the bottom of a painting. And you'll go with Poncho. That's where that nickname came from.
Well, Poncho, I thank you so much for being here this evening, and thank you all for coming out and braving the elements.
Thank you.
I think the audience really got a lot of the information that you shared. If some of you may recall, I interviewed Poncho back in the summer, and we had a stage of 4 guests. But this one is one-on-one, and we were able to get a lot deeper in this conversation. So I do thank you for coming out. All right?
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.